The morning it all cracked. She left her coffee half full. Just walked out of the kitchen, keys in hand, phone already pressed to her ear. No sip, no glance, not even her usual annoyed sigh when I forgot to stir in the oat milk. She was wearing lipstick. Lipstick for work. That shade. Burnt rose, the one she used to say was too bold for the office. But there she was, face painted like a first date, blouse tucked, heels clicking like punctuation marks on the hardwood. I stared at the coffee mug. It was the one I got her in Vermont. It had a chip in the rim from when she dropped it during one of our stupid late-night dance sessions in the kitchen. She refused to throw it away. Said it was perfect now. She hadn't touched it in a month. 31 days, to be exact. 31 days of no morning cuddles, no drive safe, no texting me memes midday, no asking if I wanted sushi or pasta for dinner. Just silence. Functional silence. Like a roommate who didn't want to be sued for neglect, but also didn't want to be sued for talking too much. I asked her, on day 12, if she was okay. She blinked, like she had to buffer the answer. Then she said, "Don't make this about you." I hadn't spoken since. I folded laundry in silence. I made dinner in silence. I cried into my pillow in silence. Even when she'd walk in late at night, heels in hand, hair slightly undone, perfume clinging to her like guilt, I stayed quiet. Because asking would only make me look pathetic. On day 21, she posted a photo on Instagram. Caption, "Soft life season clinking glasses." I wasn't in it. Neither was her ring. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I wanted to check her phone, but I didn't. I wanted to ask who he was, but I already knew. There's a kind of shine people get when they're desired by someone new. It's not something you can fake, and definitely not something I had given her lately. I took the trash out. I paid the bills. I kept the house running like I was staff. Butlers don't get loved, they just get tipped with tolerance. So today, when she left her coffee half full, I knew something was different. I knew she wasn't coming back to it. Not the coffee, not the marriage. And I was right. Because that evening, she finally looked at me and said it. After 31 days of silence. "Maybe you'll finally apologize?" I laughed. Not hard, not loud. Just one of those sad, breathless exhales that says, "I've been dying to stop pretending." I looked at her. Not the face I married, not anymore. This one wore walls. "Sorry I didn't divorce you sooner," I said. She flinched. Just barely. But I saw it. Then she turned and walked into the bedroom. She didn't slam the door. She didn't cry. She didn't even look back. But I did. And that's when I saw the envelope she left on the counter. Her name wasn't the only one on it. I didn't open it right away. The envelope sat there on the edge of the kitchen counter, perfectly aligned like she measured the distance from the stove. White. No label, no stamp, but thicker than normal. You don't forget the weight of paper when it feels like it holds a decision inside it. Her name was typed. Neatly, not handwritten. Typed. Professional. Clean. Cold. And next to it, a black pen. The fancy kind. The kind we only used once, at our wedding guest book table. I stood there for at least 5 minutes, my hand hovering over it, wondering if she meant for me to find it, or if she just didn't care anymore. Eventually, I opened it. Inside were two things, a printed legal form and a folded handwritten note. The form was obvious. A draft. Not filed yet. Dissolution of marriage. The part that hit me hardest? The box for "no children" was already checked. Not that it was wrong. Just cold. Like even our infertility struggle was now reduced to a ticked box. But the note, that was where the real gut punch lived. It wasn't long. Just 6 lines. But those lines will sit in my head like a rotting echo until the day I die. Lol. I gave you more chances than you deserved. I'm tired of pretending I respect you. Maybe now we can both be who we really are. Don't contact me. Ever. Jay. That was it. No explanation. No timeline. Not even a signature that felt human. Just the initial J, like I was some stranger who once subscribed to her newsletter and then annoyed her by asking too many questions. I sat on the couch that night with the paper on my lap and her perfume still lingering in the hallway like it had rights to every corner of this place. I thought of all the small things. The times she'd fall asleep mid-conversation and I'd tuck her in without finishing my sentence. The times she'd accidentally forget her wallet and I'd cover the bill with a smile. The times I let her win. The times I didn't speak up when her tone turned venomous around her friends. The way I shrank so she could stretch. And now I realized she didn't want a husband. She wanted a mirror that didn't talk back. That night, I poured myself a glass of bourbon and walked into her home office. I wasn't looking to snoop. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. I just needed something, anything, that proved I wasn't crazy. The drawer was already cracked open, like she didn't even care anymore who found what. Inside, a second phone, unlocked. I swear I stood there, holding that phone, hearing the ticking of our kitchen clock grow louder than my heartbeat. I tapped into her messages. I thought maybe I'd find a name, a guy, some poetic nonsense or lust-filled chats. But no, it was worse. There was a message group, titled Feral Friday's Clinking Glasses. 5 women, all married, all complaining. No, mocking their husbands. Screenshots, private texts, photos, even voice recordings. And there I was. A meme. A joke. Someone had captioned a photo of me making pancakes shirtless. Sparkles the domestic disappointment sparkles. They all laughed, including Justine. Her reply? At least he's obedient. But I'm dying inside, lol. That's when my hands started shaking. Not from the cheating. Not even from the divorce papers. From the realization that somewhere along the way, I had stopped being a person to her. I had become her punchline. And even though she left the envelope, I realized something chilling. She wasn't done with me. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of the divorce papers, or the second phone, or even the digital group chat where my wife turned me into a half-baked sitcom character for her wine-drunk friends. No, I didn't sleep because I started wondering, how long had she been planning this? It wasn't a slow drift. This wasn't a we grew apart situation. This was surgical, precise. She didn't just fall out of love. She dismantled me, piece by piece, while smiling at dinner like we were still the same couple who used to argue about which version of The Office was funnier. So when I found the second phone, and the chat, and the god-awful pancake meme, I thought I'd reached the worst of it. I hadn't. Because curiosity is a sickness, and silence is fuel. The next day, after she left for work in her too bold for the office, lipstick and her little smirk, I logged into her old laptop. The one she told me she hadn't used in years. The one she never let me sell. I expected nothing. I was hoping for nothing. But there it was, sitting right on the desktop. A single PDF. Exit plan. PDF. I didn't open it right away. My hand hovered over the trackpad like it was going to shock me. I don't know why. Some part of me still wanted to protect her. Still wanted to pretend maybe this was something innocent. A journal. A poem. A Pinterest recipe collection titled ironically. But when I opened it, it was a spreadsheet. A timeline. A schedule. AF *** King checklist. Each column labeled. Task. Status. Cover story. Risk factor. The first line read, begin emotional withdrawal, Q1 January. Status. Complete. Other lines. Plan Asheville weekend with Lisa. Cover. Girls trip. Status. Complete. Test boundaries. Ignore Lowell for 30+ days. Status. In progress. Introduce idea of him gradually. Status. Delayed. Ensure backup apartment available. Status. Complete. Create plausible narrative for exit, Lowell's mental health. Status. In progress. Is Lowell the type to retaliate? TBD. TBD. That acronym never hit so hard. I was a F *** King variable in her scheme. An equation to solve. A footnote on her escape plan. She had gamified our marriage like it was a startup exit strategy. And then, right at the bottom of the document, in a little footnote, highlighted in yellow, if Lowell finds out, stay calm, shift blame, offer him grace, he breaks under guilt. I nearly vomited. This wasn't just betrayal. This was manipulation in PowerPoint form. And the worst part? She was right. I had broken under guilt. For weeks I'd been blaming myself. I thought I was too boring, too soft, too much. I apologized for asking if she was okay. I apologized for folding her clothes wrong. I apologized for being in the same room as her silence. But now I wasn't broken. I was boiling. I closed the laptop slowly. I sat on the floor for a while. Then I stood up, took a long look at the coffee mug she hadn't touched in weeks, and made myself a promise. If she was going to stage her perfect little exit, then I'd rewrite the ending before she reached the door. And I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't send threats. I wouldn't even touch her. But when I was done, she'd wish I had. I didn't confront her. That's what she was expecting. That's what the document basically dared me to do. Blow up. Cry. Slam a door. scream something stupid like, "How could you?" and let her play the role of the calm, misunderstood woman with a tragic marriage and a husband too unstable to understand her emotional needs. But I'm not stupid. I'm just slow. Slow to react. Slow to accept. But once I get it, really get it, I become a glacier. And glaciers crush everything in their path. So I started small. That night, I made dinner. Pasta. Her favorite. I even lit a candle. She walked in around 8 p.m., dropped her heels by the door, scrolled her phone without a word, and sat across from me like we were two strangers who shared a kitchen out of legal obligation. She didn't thank me. She didn't ask why. She just ate. But I watched her, every bite, every glance at the phone. I noticed she'd unlock it with her face under the table, then respond with little smirks. She didn't bother hiding anymore. She didn't care if I noticed. In fact, I think some part of her wanted me to. That's fine. She wasn't the only one playing pretend. Over the next 3 days, I built my plan. Not a revenge fantasy. Not a childish, I'll get her back plan. A documented, time-stamped, legally sound architecture of truth. You see, I may not be charming. I may not be bold. But I'm organized. She always said I was obsessive when it came to details. Now, that's exactly what would bury her narrative. First, I reactivated our home server backups. She didn't know I had admin access again. She thought when she accidentally reset the password 6 months ago, I gave up trying. But no, I was patient. I never revoked her phone access. But I had quietly installed versioning backups. Every photo she deleted, I now had. Every message that went through our Wi-Fi, cached, archived, duplicated. Second, I checked our finances. Quietly, I went through our joint accounts, the credit cards I paid, the Venmo statements she assumed I never looked at. There were transfers. Small, subtle, spaced out, but all going to a name I didn't recognize, Emery Black. A name I'd never heard her say. A name that would become important later. And third, the hardest part, I played dumb. I acted like nothing was wrong. I texted her during the day like usual. Hope your meeting goes well. Want takeout or should I cook? I even kissed her on the forehead one morning just to see if she flinched. She didn't. That scared me more than if she had. Because it meant she knew I was too broken to fight back. That's what they count on, people like her. People who manipulate you until you believe the story they're feeding you is yours. That you were always the problem. That their betrayal is a reasonable consequence of your lack of charisma or energy or danger. But danger doesn't have to shout. Sometimes it just documents. And so, on Friday night, I told her I was heading out to see a friend. I packed a small overnight bag. She barely looked up from her phone. Okay, she said. That's it. No curiosity. No fake concern. Just that blank stare that said, you're no longer a factor. Perfect. I drove around the block. Parked. Killed the engine. Sat in silence. Waited. 23 minutes later, headlights pulled into our driveway. A car I didn't recognize. A tall man got out. Tan. Athletic. Confident. He didn't knock. He didn't text. He just walked up and opened the door. She let him in. I didn't move. I didn't take a photo. I already had what I needed. Because this wasn't about catching her in the act. It was about ending the act on my terms. And the next phase? That required someone who knew exactly who Emery Black was, and why his name appeared under 3 fake companies, a burner PayPal account, and a receipt for a weekend trip to a boutique hotel that happened during her Asheville Girls Retreat. She thought she was 6 steps ahead. But she forgot one thing. I stopped playing nice the second she made me a joke. The next morning, I returned home just before sunrise. The hallway lights were off. Her heels were gone from the door. Her purse wasn't on the kitchen counter. And her favorite hoodie, the one she always borrowed from me, had been left balled up on the couch, still faintly warm. They hadn't slept together. Not that night, anyway. I know because I checked the hallway camera she forgot I reinstalled months ago when our neighbors got robbed. She hadn't disabled it. She hadn't even looked for it. He was there for 48 minutes. Long enough to be more than a catch-up conversation. Too short to be physical. Unless she'd already crossed that line long before. I didn't know, and surprisingly, I didn't care. Not anymore. I made coffee. Strong. Bitter. The kind I used to make when we were in grad school, before she started adding almond creamer and ruining it with cinnamon sprinkles like life was a cupcake. And as I stood in the kitchen, stirring nothing, listening to the sound of her shower turning on upstairs, I realized something strange. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt. I was finished. There's a difference. I waited for her to come down. She always waited until I was out of the house to emerge like some emotional vampire who needed me gone to feel alive. But today I stayed. I made sure she saw me. I even poured her a cup of coffee and slid it across the island like I used to. She stared at it like it was poisoned. "I thought you were out," she said finally. Her voice was flat, emotionless, like she was rehearsing for some kind of polite exit. She didn't ask where I was, who I was with. She didn't care. I said. But I realized I forgot to leave something. She raised a brow. No words. Just that smug, calculated pause. So I pulled the envelope out of my jacket and placed it beside the mug. Identical format. Same white paper. Same clean font. Only this time, my name was at the top. Petition for divorce. Justine's lips parted slightly. Not enough to speak, just enough to react. Her eyes flicked to the envelope, then to me, then back again. "You're serious?" she asked. I nodded. Calm. Unblinking. She scoffed. Actually scoffed, like she couldn't believe I had the nerve to match her energy. And then she said it. The line that would haunt me for a while, not because of what it meant, but because of how effortless it sounded coming out of her mouth. "Wow. So now you're copying me." Like divorce was a haircut. Like I was some toddler parroting mommy's behavior to feel important. I didn't respond. Instead, I picked up my phone and hit send on the first of 6 pre-drafted emails. Each one perfectly time-stamped. Each one addressed to different people. Some she knew, some she didn't. Her HR director. Her therapist. A friend she had once emotionally unloaded on after a wine night, who later told me she felt concerned about Justine's behavior and asked if I was okay. The final email? Went to the lawyer she'd secretly consulted, the one I discovered after backtracing the metadata on her second phone's calendar app. I didn't say anything malicious. Nothing slanderous. Just facts. Cold. Professional. Documents attached. Screenshots included. And one final line in every message. I'm not looking to destroy her. I'm simply reclaiming the version of the story that actually happened. I looked up at Justine. Her jaw was locked now. That pink gloss she wore so easily was suddenly drying at the corners. "What did you just do?" she asked, slower this time. I smiled. "Made sure when this ends, I'm not the one people pity." For a second, just a flicker, she looked scared. Not because she'd been caught. Because for the first time, she realized she wasn't the smartest person in the room anymore. And that's when my phone buzzed. One of the emails had been opened. By her boss. You don't realize how much power silence has until you use it on someone who's always counted on your weakness. She stood there in our kitchen, blinking at me like she wasn't sure what reality she was in. Justine had always been composed, curated, even. Everything about her was polished. Her words, her looks, her lies. But at that moment, standing across from me, she looked unready. And that terrified her more than anything I could have said. I didn't gloat. I didn't yell. I didn't ask questions I already knew the answers to. I just picked up my keys and walked past her. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice cracking for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. I turned, just enough for her to see that I wasn't bluffing. "To pack the rest of my things. I'll be out before noon." And I was. She didn't follow me upstairs. She didn't protest. She didn't even try to stop me. Not right away. That came later. Because people like Justine don't fight clean. They don't fight when they're exposed. They wait until the room is clean again, until they've adjusted the lighting and the story and the way they'll spin it to anyone who still believes in them. I spent that day moving into a short-term apartment I'd booked a week prior. Cheap, small, impersonal. Perfect. The silence was refreshing, not like the silence she'd weaponized. This one was mine. That evening, the text started. 9:11 p.m. Can we talk? I think you're misinterpreting things. 9:27 p.m. Lol. Seriously. You're spiraling. This isn't you. 10:02 p.m. Whatever you sent to HR was over the line. You're acting like a child. I didn't respond. Because she was right. That wasn't me. It was the version of me that she didn't create. The version that stopped apologizing for being small, quiet, and easily rewritten. The version she never accounted for in her exit strategy. Then came the call. Blocked number. I let it ring out. Then another. Then another. Then silence again. But not for long. The next morning, I got a message from one of her colleagues, a guy I barely knew, someone who'd been at one of our Christmas parties once. He messaged me on LinkedIn of all places. Hey man, sorry to bother you, but there's some stuff going around the office. HR had a closed-door meeting with Justine today. Looked serious. You okay? I stared at the message for a while. Not because I was surprised, but because it confirmed what I already knew. Her mask wasn't cracking. It was shattering. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I opened the folder on my laptop I had titled Failsafe. Inside it were files, screenshots, backups, emails, calendar events, voice memos, all time-stamped, watermarked, and collated into a PDF I'd been updating since the day I found her exit plan document. I wasn't going to use it, not unless I had to, but knowing it was there gave me peace. Then, 2 nights later, I got the text that proved everything I needed. No manipulation, no lies, just raw panic. Please don't ruin me. You don't know what I'm dealing with. That was the moment I realized she'd finally dropped the act. Not for love, not for closure, not for understanding, but for self-preservation. She wasn't afraid I'd hurt her. She was afraid I'd tell the truth. And for the first time in years, I finally had the upper hand. It started with a photo, not one I took. One someone else did, blurry, mid-motion, angled from behind. It showed her leaving that boutique hotel with Emery Black, the man whose name appeared on those silent transfers and whose identity she hadn't dared say aloud. The photo landed in my inbox anonymously. No message, no subject line, just the file. But I didn't need context. That was the same hotel listed in her so-called Asheville Girls trip itinerary, the same one she tried so hard to bury in digital footprints that she never imagined anyone was actually watching. The next day, she messaged me again. No apology, just control disguised as concern. If you don't stop this, you're going to ruin both of us. I didn't reply, because I hadn't started anything. I hadn't contacted her boss again. I hadn't spoken to HR. I hadn't sent the photo to anyone. Not yet, but someone had. The following morning, I received a single-line email from her HR director. Thank you for trusting us. That's when I knew. The fall had begun, and it hadn't come from my hand. I heard from mutual acquaintances later that week. One friend texted me asking if everything was okay with Justine. Another one messaged, "Dude, what the hell happened?" As if I owed anyone an explanation. But I wasn't interested in telling my story anymore. Because she'd already spent months preparing hers, the story where she tried, where I was emotionally unstable, where she stayed strong through my paranoia. That's what she was going to use. That's what she'd rehearsed. Now, that story was collapsing without me lifting a finger. Because the truth has gravity. I didn't have to drop it. I just had to let it fall. She showed up outside my apartment on a Thursday. No warning. No call. Just a knock. I opened the door. She looked different. Smaller. Not in size, in presence. Like someone who finally saw her reflection and didn't recognize what was staring back. I didn't let her in. She didn't ask. She stood in the hallway, arms crossed like it would protect her from the things she'd already done. Then, almost whispering, she said, "You win." I stayed silent. Because I didn't come here to win. I came to escape. And she noticed. "I never meant to hurt you like this," she said next. But her voice didn't carry remorse. It carried fear. Fear of consequence, of exposure, of finally being seen for what she was without the script, the costume, or the angle. I tilted my head slightly. "What part did you not mean?" I asked. "The part where you mocked me? The part where you made a plan to erase me? Or the part where you laughed while doing it?" And that is when she cried. The first time since all of this began. Not when I left. Not when I sent her divorce papers. Not when I found the burner phone. But now, when she realized the damage wasn't private anymore. That was all she ever cared about. Her image. Her control. Her reputation. "People don't know the full story," she said through tears. "They're only hearing your version." I stepped back. Just a single pace. Enough to let her feel the distance. "They're not hearing my version," I told her. "They're hearing the truth. And for the first time, I'm not apologizing for it." I shut the door. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. Because this time, I was the one who walked away while she stood in silence. And that silence? It finally belonged to her. You expect closure to feel like fireworks. You think there's going to be some big cinematic moment. Raised voices, someone chasing the other through the rain, maybe a final breakdown with tears and regrets that change everything. But in real life, closure comes slowly. Quietly. In the smallest, dullest moments. And then one day, you realize you're free. I didn't hear from Justine again after that night in the hallway. She sent a few more texts, all carefully measured, all sounding like she was trying to manage her image rather than make amends. But when I stopped responding, they stopped coming. Like clockwork. Eventually, her lawyer contacted mine and asked for a dignified settlement. I agreed, not because I wanted to protect her, but because I wanted to protect myself from becoming her. She destroyed with precision. I wouldn't answer with fire. I would leave her with silence, the kind I used to drown in, now returned with peace. When the papers were finalized, I didn't cry. I didn't drink. I didn't call anyone. I walked outside, sat on a park bench with a coffee that didn't need oat milk or cinnamon sprinkles, and just watched people pass by. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to be anything for anyone. Not a caretaker. Not a joke. Not a disappointment. Just a person. One afternoon, maybe 2 weeks after the divorce went through, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years. Her name was Corinne. We went to college together. Back then, she was the quiet girl who wrote essays that made professors go silent. I was the anxious kid who checked his email 5 times before submitting anything. We were never close, but we shared a few long walks across campus when the world felt too big. She recognized me at a bookstore, of all places. I was flipping through a novel I'd never heard of, pretending to be the kind of man who reads for pleasure, when she smiled and said my name like it hadn't been dragged through a battlefield. We talked for 2 hours. About books, life, nothing. Not once did she ask what happened. Not once did I offer. And as I walked her to her car, she looked at me, kind but direct, and said, "You look like someone who finally came home to themselves." It nearly broke me, because it was true. That night, I lay in bed, my own bed, in a place that finally felt like mine, and realized I no longer replayed her voice in my head. I no longer wondered what I did wrong. I no longer waited for someone to choose me. I had chosen myself. There's no revenge better than rebuilding. There's no victory louder than peace. And there's no version of me she gets to rewrite ever again.